Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we are unpacking a really profound economic shift. And to truly ground this, I want you to picture a scenario that is becoming increasingly and tragically common. Imagine a 70-year-old man. It's 6 a.m. and he is clocking into work. His knees are aching, he is absolutely exhausted, but here is the critical part. He's there because he simply cannot afford to stop. He literally cannot afford to retire. And you know, this isn't just some hypothetical, dramatic story. This is the reality of the modern economy. It's happening because the fundamental rules of retirement have been completely rewritten while most of us weren't even looking. We're watching this massive structural transition from guaranteed comfort to absolute personal responsibility, and it is catching millions of people completely off guard.
70. That number right there represents the age many people will reach only to wake up and discover a terrifying financial reality. The scary part isn't just that one guy working through physical pain, it's that millions of people, maybe even some of us watching right now, are unknowingly walking down that exact same path, and most of us don't even realize it. Why? Because we're operating under this entirely outdated set of assumptions. We still think 65 is the magical finish line. But the economic reality is pushing that horizon further and further out. Actually, scratch that. For a staggering number of middle-class workers who are just trying to afford basic living expenses, the goalpost hasn't just moved, it's practically disappeared entirely.
So let's really dive into this stark contrast between the retirement dream we were all sold for decades and the harsh, boots-on-the-ground financial reality of today. For a long time, the formula was beautifully straightforward, right? Work hard, buy a home, raise a family, stash a little away on the side, and then boom, enjoy your final years with money to spare. But today, that formula is fundamentally broken. Everyday expenses are violently outpacing our paychecks. Housing prices have exploded to these historic, unbelievable highs. Healthcare costs are just surging year after year, and our wages, they've largely just stagnated. It has become incredibly difficult to build that once guaranteed safety net when the basic cost of just existing in the modern world is chewing up almost every single dollar you make. Because those everyday living costs are consuming so much of our income, people simply aren't saving enough. And I want to be clear, this isn't just an individual failure. This is a massive systemic issue. Imagine the absolute shock of reaching what should be the end of your career, only to sit down, do the math, and realize it doesn't add up. Surveys repeatedly show this massive percentage of workers feeling entirely unprepared for the future. We're talking about a significant portion of adults having virtually zero retirement savings. Zero! We are watching this grim expectation emerge across the workforce, where a growing number of people now honestly believe they will never, ever be able to retire. They're just anticipating a future of perpetual labor. So, how exactly did we end up here? How did we arrive at what financial experts are straight up calling the biggest retirement crisis in modern history? Well, it wasn't an accident, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. To understand how we got here, we actually have to look backward. We need to completely deconstruct the foundation of how retirement used to work. That's the only way to see exactly where the structure failed and why the modern worker is left so incredibly vulnerable today. Because this shift, this move away from systemic support to putting the entire burden on the individual, is undeniably the defining financial story of our generation. Historically, retirement was built kind of like a super sturdy three-legged stool. It was supported by three really solid pillars. First, you had defined benefit pensions provided by your employer. And these were incredible. They basically guaranteed you a set, reliable income for the rest of your life, just for putting in your years of service. Second, you had your own personal savings, acting as a nice little buffer. And third, you had affordable living costs. That meant your money actually stretched further. Your dollars had real, tangible purchasing power. When all three of these pillars worked in harmony, financial stability in your later years was pretty much a lock. You didn't need to be some sort of Wall Street financial genius. You just had to participate in the system. But think about what happens when we try to apply those exact same pillars to today's economy. The pension pillar? It has virtually vanished. Decades ago, employers quietly shifted all of that financial risk away from themselves and dumped it right onto you, transitioning to defined contribution plans, like the 401k. That means the entire burden of building a retirement fund has been thrown squarely onto that second pillar, your personal savings. You have to be the investment manager now. And right when you need your personal savings to do literally all the heavy lifting, the third pillar completely collapses as the cost of living hits all-time highs. The entire support system is just gone. And this dynamic creates what financial experts call the dangerous gap. It is a brutal mathematical trap. Think about it. You are now expected to fund your entire future solely on your own, which naturally means you need to be saving significantly more money than previous generations did. But because your rent or mortgage, your groceries, and your healthcare are devouring so much of your paycheck, you actually have far less leftover income to do that critical saving. It's a terrifying squeeze. You are quite literally being asked to lift a much heavier weight, but with significantly less strength. And that gap, that missing money, is exactly where millions of futures are just quietly falling apart.
Now, when you're staring down that dangerous gap, human nature just takes over, right? We naturally look for a lifeline. So millions of people fall into this really comfortable trap of assuming the government is just going to step in and magically solve the math problem for them. There's this widespread and honestly kind of dangerous reliance on the idea that Social Security alone will bridge the gap and give them a soft landing when it's finally time to hang up the boots. It is a wonderfully comforting psychological safety net, but relying on it without actually understanding the underlying math, that is a total recipe for financial disaster.
Because the hard data tells a vastly different story. Financial experts are practically screaming warnings against this assumption. Listen, Social Security was originally designed to replace only about 40% of an average worker's pre-retirement income. 40%, not 100. It was meant to keep the elderly out of extreme poverty, not to fund some comfortable, leisurely lifestyle. If you're relying entirely on government benefits, those payments are only going to cover a fraction of your actual living expenses. The harsh, undeniable truth is that your personal investment accounts and your own savings are more critical right now than at any other point in modern history. You simply cannot outsource your financial security anymore.
You know, human psychology plays a really massive role in this crisis too. We all suffer from something behavioral economists call hyperbolic discounting. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying we heavily prioritize today and deeply underestimate tomorrow. When you're 25, retirement feels like a lifetime away. I mean, why save for age 65 when rent is due today, right? By 35, life gets really expensive. Maybe you have kids, and you tell yourself, I'll start planning later. But life comes at you fast. Suddenly you blink, you're 55. Retirement is staring you right in the face, and you haven't compounded any wealth. This timeline, it's a trap of our own making. It's a cognitive bias that keeps us all severely underfunded.
Okay, take a deep breath, because here is the good news. This doesn't have to be a story of total doom and gloom. While the old playbook, just working a steady job and coasting on a pension, is completely dead, there's absolutely still time to act. You can for sure still achieve financial freedom, but it is going to require a radical shift in your mindset. You cannot play a brand new game with the old rules. You have to actively adopt a new financial playbook that's designed specifically for today's chaotic economic reality. It's all about taking absolute ownership of your financial destiny. This new playbook basically relies on 4 active, non-negotiable strategies. First off, a single salary just isn't cutting it anymore. You need to build multiple streams of income to create a real buffer against economic shocks. Second, you have to invest consistently in assets that actually outpace inflation. Just hoarding cash in a savings account is going to slowly drain your purchasing power. Third, aggressively crushing high-interest debt is absolutely crucial. You have to free up that cash flow so you can actually save for tomorrow. And finally, you've got to prioritize your own financial education. In an era where you are the sole manager of your wealth, your financial literacy is literally your strongest asset.
The core takeaway I want you to grasp here is that retirement isn't impossible. It's just fundamentally changed. The whole economy evolved, and our personal finances absolutely have to evolve right alongside it. Those who embrace this new reality, who educate themselves and take aggressive ownership of their wealth, they're the ones who will still achieve that freedom. But those who stubbornly cling to the old playbook, the ones waiting for a magical pension that isn't coming, or relying entirely on an overburdened government system, they're the ones who are going to end up exactly like that man we talked about at the very beginning, clocking in at 6 a.m. in their 70s, physically exhausted, and working forever.
So I want to leave you with one final thought to really chew on. Based on everything we've unpacked today in this explainer about vanishing pensions, the rising cost of living, and that truly dangerous gap, what do you think? Is the dream of retirement becoming mathematically impossible for the average person? Or is it just sitting there waiting for you to attack it with a new aggressive strategy? Think carefully about this, because the strategic adaptations you make right now, today, will absolutely determine how you spend the rest of your life. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you in the next one.